to the show, head coach of the Denver Broncos. I can't believe I'm sitting here with you today.
I appreciate you having me on, and all the people that not only in the U.S. but in Canada that can tune in. I've got a lot of, like I said earlier, a lot of Canadian buddies. So it's an exciting time of the year. You know, we're talking football, obviously, and we're a week away, Joe, from a lot of important decisions. And so we have one more preseason game here day after tomorrow in New Orleans. And then when we come back, essentially we have to go from 90 players to 53. And so obviously there's a lot of moving parts there, and that's a challenge into itself. And then you establish your 16-man practice squad. So the guys on your practice squad have to be made available to everyone else first. So we're kind of at that stage of the season, and that usually tells you the regular season's right around the corner.
Yeah, absolutely. So jumping into that preseason game that you have versus the Saints on Saturday, what are you looking for out of your key players like Bo Nix and Cortland Sutton in those 8 to 10 reps that you'll see?
I think that this year our schedule was a little different. We had 2 joint practices with San Francisco in week 1, with Arizona in week 2. And so normally the starters would play in week 2, but just because of the reps we had gotten, when you have a joint practice, a player may get 65 snaps, and it's not tackled to the ground, but there's still 65, physical snaps. A veteran player in a preseason game might get, anywhere from 10 to 20. And so we felt it was smart for us to rest those guys last week. And it gave us a great deal of exposure to a lot of the younger guys competing for roster spots. So in New Orleans, the plan would be 8 to 10. And to your question, I think, it's that polish. It's that, in and out of the huddle, up and down to the line of scrimmage, on and off, without glitches. And, similar to a dry run or a rehearsal, you want it to be clean, and you want to apply pressure. Like when I say that, a sense of urgency, because certainly in 2 weeks, they're going to feel that sense of urgency. And so you don't want that to be the first time. So most of all the players are going to get that early stage of the game. We call it phase 1. And then it's not really driven by like a quarter, it's driven by snaps. So sometimes, usually the defense or the offense will hit that 10 play threshold first.
Okay.
And when they do, so one part of your team might be in phase 2, and the defensive side of the ball might be in phase 1 still, because they're still waiting to hit their 10 snaps. And then we get into, 2 important parts of this preseason game. We said it the other day, I think we could get the roster to 58 right now. And that just depends on the day and who we're talking to. But realistically, there's some serious competition for some of these spots towards the back of the roster. Special teams will be important, and but from the starters, it's looking like ready, sharp, crisp, and that's what you hope to come away from when that game's over relative to that group.
Okay, so what about those guys fighting for that roster spot? What are you hoping to see out of them, and what advice are you giving them as they are taking that field Saturday?
Well, I think we say this all the time to our team. During preseason games, one of the things that's always, I think, tough is when I see sideline interviews during the game. And what I mean by that is this. Depending on who you are as a player, it may not be the most important play or series for you, but it's the most important play or series for somebody. And so there is that respect for their peers who they've been in camp with, competing, for their livelihood. And we also talk about, you're putting it on tape, so it may not be just for us. You're going to see come next Tuesday, everyone gets down to 53, and a number of players are going to go from one team that waived them and get by another team. And so you're putting your best stuff on tape for the 31 other teams as well. And I think sometimes it's hard for the younger player. They tend to stare at the line in front of them. Yeah. And the line in front of them is really a minute line. It's not an accurate line, because if I'm a tight end, for instance, and I'm a young player, I'm also competing with the other 31 teams' tight ends. And because when the dust settles, let's say each team keeps 3 on their roster, maybe 4. I'm competing for every one of those spots, not just the 3 or 4 here in Denver. And I think the veteran player knows that a little bit more than the player that just arrives.
So those are going to be really hard phone calls to make, really hard meetings to make for those players who are getting cut. What advice will you be giving those players that you will have to let go?
Yeah, I think 2 things. We always do it in person. It never gets any easier. I would say it's always more challenging, Joe, for the player who there's been a history with. So you go back to 06 when I first started with the Saints, and then eventually we get to 09 and win a Super Bowl. And by the time we get to 2017, there was only one player left from the Super Bowl team, and that was Drew Brees. Yeah. So if we took the dots that represented all the other players on that team, some may have retired, some may have been traded, some may have been cut, but there's a departure, and that was a full recycle. The advice for me, I think, and I say this respectfully, is a little bit easier because I was one of those players that was released 4 or 5 times. Had a tryout in the United States with a couple NFL teams, then play in the Arena League, then go up to Ottawa with the Rough Riders, get cut at the end of the summer, come back home. And so that meeting that I'm going to have next Tuesday and Wednesday, I've been on the other side of the table 4 or 5 times. And the other thing I think is important is just because we're releasing you, your dream's not over. In other words, it might be we're deep at this position. You may, because from experience, and you hope this isn't a big list, but there are players that I've released that have gone on and had success. And so I think communication is so important, and honesty. I think the player appreciates that, and that, hey, the door, when you leave this office, I'm not shutting the door. You could end up back here in 3 weeks. So 3 things would be, I understand. Number 2 would be, the dream's not over for you yet. Only you decide that. And then number 3, that door's still open.
Okay, beautiful messages for those players that will be facing those cuts. Let's jump into Bo Nix. You talked about Drew Brees and your coaching of him, franchise quarterback there. What are you hoping to see out of Bo Nix in the second year? We know last year just exceeded those expectations. Do you see him being the future, Hall of Fame quarterback for the Denver Broncos?
Well, Bill used to say, we're not going to shove him in Canton yet. He's certainly our future. We spent a lot of time in that pick, in that decision, as every team does. And it's difficult drafting that position. And I say that respectfully for everyone that has to make a decision especially early in the draft, because number one, you know that that position is going to get taken earlier. And so if you're moving in that direction and you know you've got to pay a steeper price for that position, obviously the mistakes are magnified then, because you could have possibly maybe drafted a player that had a higher grade. But I would say this: the expectations. The great thing about Bo is the expectations he has for himself are so high, and I think just as a teammate, as a leader in year two, I know his focus is winning, and I think, look, all these quarterbacks, they all know now ultimately when their career is over that they're going to be measured on how they won, how many games they won, did they win championships, Super Bowls, and I think I think part of it is also the most important, powerful thing for each player, coach, any one of us, is your respect amongst your peers, and I think that's a pretty powerful thing. And then, secondly, fear of failure is a pretty powerful thing. That sounds not silly, but it sounds, but that gets you up in the morning early because you're like, man, I've got to be on point today, and I think when you look at his work ethic and how he prepares, he's the son of a coach from, Alabama, where football is very important. He's hit adversity, and then he's also had a lot of success. So I think, that term building off of last year, I think it's really more of a comfort level. Mm-hmm. There's so much that goes into that position where, his ability to recite a play in the huddle today was different than this time a year ago because he's speaking the language better and he's learned it better. And so there are, let's say 70 snaps, and, he's going to be involved in a lot of decisions. And I think the experience he had from a year ago is going to better serve him as it pertains to those decisions coming up this season.
Absolutely. Well, I have a lot of faith in him, and I'm really hoping that he is able to just surpass expectations again. Sean, let's talk about your running back depth. We know you added J.K. Dobbins. You also drafted R.J. Harvey. What are your hopes for R.J. Harvey to move out that depth chart?
Yeah, look, he was someone. Yeah, you have players in the draft occasionally that you really target. That doesn't mean you get them. But it's okay to fall in love with certain players. And I would say he was one of those players. From a stature standpoint, we don't really protocol the height with the running backs. But if we're going to take short, we don't want it small. And so if you saw his stature, he's shorter, but with a very strong frame, and he's had a real good camp. And then we were able to get J.K. Dobbins from your Chargers, Joe. And and he's come in and brought leadership to the room. It was a young room prior to his arrival. If you looked at it, and from Blake Watson to Tyler Bidet, Audric Estime, Jaleel McLaughlin, and then RJ, all of those guys are players that are in, like, call it their first 3 years of the NFL. And then every once in a while you bring in a veteran free agent, and he just brings a little juice with his personality. And that's one of the things that that I didn't have any exposure to. And each day at practice you hear him. Mm-hmm. And I think that leadership has helped that room. But to RJ Harvey's point, man, I think you're going to like what you see when you watch this player run. And I would say if there's a trait, he's built low to the ground. he's got exceptional lateral quickness, and so that ability to move not only forward but real quick side to side. I think he's a tough tackle because of how he's built. He finished near the top of all the metrics relative to yards per carry, and it was a good class for runners. Right down the road in Las Vegas, we're going to have to deal with this Genty, and he's a special player. So, but we were excited. We were able to land one, especially in the second round.
Yeah, super exciting there. And you mentioned Genty there with the Raiders. You look at the AFC West, it's completely loaded, especially with the head coaches you're going up against. You got Andy Reid, Jim Harbaugh, Pete Carroll. How do you expect the Denver Broncos to compete within the division?
Yeah, listen, it's a strong division. When Pete got hired by Seattle, I thanked him because when that took place, he made me the youngest coach in this division. I think Jim Harbaugh maybe is 4 days older than I am. And then Andy, all of us have kind of coached against each other for a long time. And I don't want to speak for the others, but I think I can safely say that there's a great amount of respect for the jobs that all of these coaches have done in their careers. It's difficult. And you see the consistency, the staying power. And so when you play an AFC West team currently, that you're going to get a well-coached team, a well-coached game plan. And so you're not going to have that breather, if you will. And the teams are talented. You could have the four of us in the same division with average to below average teams, but when you look at the teams, the way they're built, I think, and look, let's not kid ourselves. And to credit Kansas City, it starts with them and Andy and Patrick and what they've built there. The three of us are chasing that, and quite frankly, it becomes a little bit like King of the Hill, and that's the team that the others have to catch.
Oh, absolutely. And I look at the Denver Broncos defense, and I think amongst the division, probably one of the strongest defenses out there, if not in the whole league. Sean, what else do you think sets you apart within the division and within the league as a whole?
Yeah, great question. Obviously, one of the keys to having success in our league, and every year showed up last year with Philadelphia, is your ability defensively. It's hard to win in this league if you can't play defense. In fact, it's almost impossible. I think the other thing, and this gets back to helping the quarterback, I think we're looking for balance, if you will, and the game has changed in the last 20 years. We're seeing a lot more spread out RPO throws, and yet our ability to improve our running game, I think, is going to have a big impact on how this upcoming season unfolds. From a special team standpoint, we feel like we've got one of the better returners in the league with Marvin Mims, and we had a change with coordinators. Darren Rizzi comes in, and ironically, when Mike Westhoff was with me in New Orleans and he left, Darren Rizzi replaced him, and so the exact same transitions taking place. Both are fantastic coaches that I've worked with. So there is some symmetry, or I would say familiarity with the staff, and I would say the same a little bit for this team. The free agents that we signed are going to be, I think, very important for us. And then, last year we played a lot of young players, and we knew we were up against a dead cap number that was pretty high, so we were going to have to play young players. But sometimes young can be dangerous and hungry, and they don't know what they don't know. And I like the mix right now with the veteran leadership and some of these younger players.
Absolutely. So coaching in the NFL, it comes with intense pressure. I couldn't even imagine the pressure that you face week in and week out and season in and season out. Is there a small story, personal story that you can share with us, either from a moment with a player here in preseason or with a fan that really reminds you of why you love your job, Sean?
I think it's a great question. I think the in the beginning, like I'm from Illinois and grew up in Chicago, a suburb, and played college football and wanted to play professionally. And then pretty soon, after a year of being released, getting into coaching and like getting in a car and driving from Chicago to San Diego State, 3 days. Um, I think the attraction was teaching. In other words, in learning how to teach and learning how to help others. Um, my high school coach had a big influence on me, not along with my parents, but every once in a while, there's one of these special people that, as a parent, it could be a counselor, a music teacher, it could be one of any number of people, someone that teaches your daughter math, and they're above and beyond maybe what the expectation is. And when you may be lucky to get two or three of those in your life, but when your child gets one or two of them, it's pretty special. And I got one, as a young coach in high school. And so, to your point or your question relative to those moments, it's when you see growth, and then you see confidence, and then you see success, and you get to see that smile. And look, the part of the reason we got into coaching is like we didn't want to leave the locker room. Like
Yeah.
like they're going to say, "Hey, we're going to kick you out of here. You can't play." And then you said, "Well, no, I don't want to leave." And then, well, you got to do something. And but being part of a team and watching a team have success, and then also the small stories that might involve a phone conversation at night. It might involve a lunch. It might involve, a meeting in your office. Um, we're going to have a team meeting here in a little bit, and there's going to be 90 players along with 25 coaches. And I don't know of that group, but there's probably two with a little heartache right now over something or concern when you deal with that many numbers. And so it's the relationships ultimately. And I remember wanting to just be a college coach in the Big Ten. That was a goal,
Yeah.
and then people would often ask, what do I do to coach in the NFL? And I my advice is always, look, there are tons of opportunities relative to internships. You can get the all 22 film now that you used to not be able to get. So you should be looking at that closely. And it may come through the college ranks, but ultimately, I don't think I ever really thought about where the next one was. It was always where your feet are present, and like the next ones, like kind of handle themselves.
Okay, so as you talk about that, Coach, what do you want to be remembered for at the end of the day?
Um, I think, hmm, well, I think most importantly, a good father, and a good teacher. Um, I think I think it's important that player, every one of them that's had an opportunity to play for me and our staff. Some of them maybe just training camp, right? And then some of them maybe longer careers, but that he cared about you, and that he and his staff would work hard to put them in the best position possible to have success. That's our job, and sometimes that's 2 in the morning, looking at film. Um, but that I say we because it's easy to say but that we as coaches on our staffs that work together really wanted to see them maximize their earning potential and get the best out of their career.
I love it. Beautiful messages there throughout the whole show, Coach. I really appreciate your time today. Week 1, facing the Titans. I can hardly wait to watch you guys, and I'm expecting a strong start this year. Are you as well?
Yeah, well, listen, we haven't started strong the past 2 years. Year 1, I think we lost 3 or 4 in a row to start, and then last year opened at Seattle with a loss, and then Pittsburgh. We went on a road trip that was so important for this team a year ago, and it was a good Tampa Bay team, which we played on the road and got a real, probably our most significant win. If you said what was the turning point last year, I would have said how we played at Tampa, and then the Jets. And this league's funny. Any team that gets to the playoffs, any team that wins 10 or more games, there's usually a string, so you can't yo-yo back and forth. You usually put 3, 4, 5 together. And certainly we're not looking past we know Tennessee's at home. And so there's some nuances there with a rookie quarterback. Brian Callahan, his father, I've worked with, Bill Callahan. And so we know they'll have a good plan. I think you find yourself focusing more on your own team than you do the opponent. Obviously, you have to study the scheme, but making sure your players are ready.
Okay, final message to Broncos Nation.
Yeah, well, it's time. Here we are. We're excited. And the other thing is the appreciation we have for our crowd and our fan base. It's amazing. I saw something on the scoreboard the other day, and I didn't realize it, but they currently hold the record for most consecutive sellouts of all the NFL teams. And it's just a credit to the fan base and the expectation, the championships that have come before us. And we're pushing hard to add to that legacy.
It's going to be a fantastic year, Sean. I want to thank you so much for joining me here on the Jo Madden Sports Podcast. I am rooting for you. I'm rooting for the Denver Broncos, even though you're going up against my LA Chargers. I wish you guys all the best this upcoming season.
Thank you, Jo.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you.